Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be a little bit different from the videos that I usually make on this channel. I'm not going to be cooking or cleaning or anything like that. I just wanted to talk to you guys about my birth experiences and what I didn't like about them, what I would do differently, what I wish that I did. I wish that I had videos like this before I gave birth to almost all three of mine. I didn't really look up these videos. I didn't really notice them until after I already had my babies, which sucks because I wish I had these to go by. So I decided to make one of my own. So I am going to start off with telling Ashton's story. He's my 4-year-old. He was my first baby. With Ashton, that was my first baby. I was 22. I knew nothing about babies. I was a babysitter, but for the most part I didn't know anything about babies in general, and I should have done more research. That's one of the biggest things I regret, is I didn't really know anything about baby gear or newborns or sleep schedules or anything like that. The only thing that I knew was from what people would tell me, which was mostly negative things, oh, you better sleep while you can, or yeah, you used to have a life after you have your baby, your life's over, and all kinds of negative things were said to me, but I didn't really know anything about babies in general, and I wish that I did. The first thing that I regret is the doctor that I had. Choosing a doctor was really stressful for me because I was in the middle of a move and I had to choose a specific doctor because of my insurance. So the doctor that I ended up choosing, he was nice and he was a good person, but he was super intimidating and he made me really uncomfortable. Obviously, you don't want a gyno delivering your baby that you're uncomfortable with or that you feel intimidated by. So that was obviously a mistake. And I was also really awkward with asking him questions because I felt like he was annoyed with all of my questions. You definitely want a doctor that you feel really comfortable with, that you can talk to freely, and that you don't feel weird, asking even super personal, weird questions. You should feel totally normal and totally comfortable talking to them about that. That's what they're there for. So that was a big regret. When I actually started having contractions, I didn't really know if they were real or what was happening because this was my first baby, but my first instinct was just to go to the hospital. I'm okay, well, I guess I just got to go to the hospital, it's time. And I regret that because you don't want to spend more time in the hospital than you have to. And when I went to the hospital with Ashton, I wasn't even in pain when I was going to the hospital. I could walk, I was totally fine. And I did so much of my labor there, but obviously I was progressing enough for me to get checked in and they actually let me stay. But I wish that they didn't because I wish that I was able to do a lot of that at home. It would have been way more comfortable. I would have been in my element. Side note, I didn't even want to go to the hospital with my first baby. I actually wanted to do a home birth, which after having 3 babies, I honestly don't know if I could do that. I am so bad with dealing with the pain. But I mean, if you've done that, you are a superwoman in my eyes. That's amazing. But with my first baby, that was my plan, but I lived in Alabama and midwives were illegal, home births were illegal, so the hospital was my only option. So when I actually got to the hospital, I knew about different people's experiences saying that their nurses were amazing, and without their nurses, they don't think they could have gotten through labor. So I was really excited to have really sweet, loving, encouraging nurses. That was not the case at all. I was 100% just a patient. I was there to have a baby and to get out, and that's how I was treated. I mean, everyone was nice, to a certain extent, but nobody was caring or, I don't know. I just wanted to be treated differently. I just felt I was treated 100% just like I am a patient, and I just needed to hurry up and give birth and then leave. That's another thing I regret. I didn't do a tour of the hospital. I didn't meet any nurses. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just chose the hospital that gyno was delivering at, and I went to that one. I knew nothing about the hospital or anything. I think that that's something that you would definitely want to do, especially with your first baby, is tour the hospitals, find the hospital that you like, the nurses, will make you feel like welcome, and that will be like the hospital that you would want to give birth at is like. And also I think it's like a smaller hospital as well. Like smaller hospitals are able to focus more on you than bigger hospitals are. They have a lot more patients in bigger hospitals, so that's definitely something that I learned with my third. I went to a smaller hospital and the experience was 100% different. And then, you know, my doctor, I told you I was intimidated and uncomfortable around him, and apparently all the nurses were too. Every nurse knew who he was. They would come in and be like, oh, who's our doctor? Like talking to the other nurse, and they would say the doctor, and they were like, oh, like nobody was a fan of him. And it's because he liked to do everything like his way. He was very old-fashioned, and he had the way that he's been doing it for years. He's delivered so many babies, so that's why he does it his way. But yeah, so that also put like a really awkward aura in the room and made everything kind of uncomfortable. Moving on, I ended up deciding to get the epidural after crying silently for a while in pain in a corner. I decided, okay, I'm gonna get the epidural. Like, I can't. I don't think I can do this. I told the nurse that I wanted to get an epidural, and when he finally came in almost 2 hours later, I was in like so much pain, like I couldn't even like focus on what was like going on around me or anything. But he came in the room, and like the first thing he started doing was complaining to the nurses, saying that he wasn't supposed to be there. Like apparently he wasn't supposed to be there. I don't even know the details or anything. Like I didn't ask. Like I'm just sitting there on the bed like in pain waiting for him to, you know, stab my back. And I'm just like, what is going on? Like I kind of had to like separate myself from the situation because it just felt like things just like kept going wrong in a way. And I was like, this is not what I envisioned like at all. So he comes over, and of course he's super down to business. He's just like, lay on your side, you know, and he's not like, hi, how are you? I'm going to be doing your epidural, like nothing like that. So that was uncomfortable. So I get my epidural, and then my doctor comes in, and it's immediately like down to business. I give birth in a couple of pushes. It doesn't take very long. That was fine. You know, I mean, of course it was my first baby, so I was like in heaven, even though I wasn't having a very good experience, just because like I had my baby, and like my baby was just my main focus at that point. So that was really awesome. I was, you know, wheeled back to my room, and after a couple of hours, the nurses came in there and they're like, all right, you should be able to go to the bathroom, like stand up and let's go to the bathroom. We'll help you, but you should be able to walk now. So I stand up, and like I feel everything except my left foot. And the nurses are like, why are you limping like that? And I'm like, I don't have feeling in my left foot. And, you know, they were like concerned, but like, you know, they were like, maybe it'll wake up. We'll see. Long story short, it didn't wake up for 3 months, but eventually it did. And after lots of doctor appointments and x-rays and whatever, they couldn't figure it out, but naturally it just healed itself. So that's good. So that birth experience, what I took from that and the things that I regretted the most was didn't like my doctor, didn't like the hospital, did not take control of my birth experience because I was so uncomfortable with speaking up, and I regretted that so much. Like, yeah, I didn't speak up for myself. I didn't say like, this is what I want to do and this is what I'm gonna do. And like, you can do that. Like, this is your experience. Like, this is your baby, and you can do whatever you want to do. You can birth in whatever position you want to birth in. You can choose the hospital. You can choose your doctor. You can, you know, have like your diffuser and essential oils or candles or music or whatever. And I didn't do any of that. And I regret that so much. My second birth experience was actually worse in a way than my first. My whole plan went out the door again with this birth as well. I knew I was in labor the morning that I woke up. I was having contractions, like they didn't hurt or anything, but like I knew I was in labor, and like they felt like they weren't going away. And at this point I was kind of panicking, thinking like, oh my gosh, what if I accidentally like give birth in my apartment? Like I have to hurry and get to the hospital. So I go to the hospital, and they end up sending me home because they're saying that I'm not progressing fast enough for them to check me in, and that they don't believe that I was actually in labor. They told me that I was probably in false labor and to go home and go to sleep. But there was literally no way for me to go home and go to sleep. Like, I was in pain. I knew it wasn't false labor, but they told me to go home. So I did. Well, there you go. I ended up doing a ton of my labor at home, which was good. Like, I was eating pizza, I was surrounded by my family, we were watching TV, so that was cool, until all of a sudden it was not, and I was in so much pain I couldn't stand myself. But we finally are like, all right, we have to go to the hospital. These contractions aren't what they say. Like, they said they had to like last for 2 minutes and they had to be like 5 minutes apart or something like that. But even with Ashton, my contractions were never regular. With Eve, my contractions were not regular either. So even though they told us not to come back until they were like this certain, you know, we still went back, and I couldn't even walk up to the hospital, y'all. Like, I was in so much pain, I would just have to stop and like double over and just like try to get through the contraction because it was so bad. Eventually I get up to my hospital room. I have to have a wheelchair in order to move because I was in so much pain. Like, I kind of like shut down when I'm in pain and I don't move. I eventually got up there and they send us to a waiting room. Okay, they send us to a waiting room and they're like, a nurse will be with you shortly to check you to see if we're gonna admit you. And I'm like, what? Like, are you joking? Like, I couldn't believe that they were like not just gonna check me in. So I'm like sitting in the waiting room and I'm just like pacing at this point. Like, I'm pacing because I'm nervous about my next contraction, and now I'm nervous about like the baby just like falling out of me. Like, I had so much anxiety at this point. Then another contraction came on, and when I have a contraction, like, I could not stand up straight for some reason. So I just like bent over on one of the chairs in the waiting room and just like pretty much like screamed, I guess, because it hurt so bad. And so then like the receptionist at the desk in the waiting room like looks over and she's like, you know, and then she picks up the phone. She's like, yeah, she's in labor. You guys need to come get her like right now. Like, duh, I told you that. Like, I told you that. They end up coming and getting me, and they wheel me to the room to check me before they check me in. And so the nurse like gives me my gown, and she like tells me to go in the bathroom and change. And I can't even stand up. And so I'm in the bathroom, and I have like the gown, and I'm sitting on the floor, and she's like, hey, do you have it on yet? And I was like, no, I can't move. I can't put it on. Like, I'm sorry, I can't. So she comes in and she pretty much just puts it on for me. Like, I was like not in my body anymore. Like, so she puts the gown on me. She checks me, and I was like 7 centimeters and like 80% effaced or something like that. And so then like when she checks me, then she like kind of like freaks out a little bit. And she's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna check you in, you know, like, yeah, all right, let's do this. Like, do you want an epidural, blah, blah, blah. And I said I wanted an epidural. And so they wheel me to the room that I'm actually gonna deliver in. I'm sitting on the bed, just waiting for my epidural, and I'm like rocking on the end of my table because I am freaking out about when the next contraction is gonna come. And I'm just telling myself, I'm like, don't freak out, don't freak out. Don't freak out, because I was legit about to have a panic attack. Like, I did not feel pain like that, like, ever. Like, with Ashton, I think I only got up to 5 centimeters before I got an epidural. But I was like, oh my gosh, I never felt pain like that before. The guy that did my epidural eventually came in. Oh, and by the way, of course I'm terrified to get an epidural because of like my foot, but at the same time, because of what happened with my foot. But at the same time, I was in so much pain that it was like fogging like my actual like conscious, being like, don't do that. Like, I don't know. So I did get an epidural, and luckily everything was fine, and I got the feeling back everywhere. So thank God for that. I was like praying so hard when I was getting the epidural, like, please God, don't let this paralyze me, please. So then that was fine. And then they tell me that my doctor that I loved so much is not going to deliver my baby, and some random old guy comes in and delivers my baby. Don't even remember his name. So that was unfortunate. And the sad part is when I had Ashton, like, I was so overwhelmed. I was so happy. I was just like in tears. It was just like the happiest moment of my entire life. And I was so looking forward to that feeling again. Like, it was just like the best feeling in the world. I was like so ready for that feeling again. And so I deliver my baby, and they take her, and then they start cleaning her, and they won't like give her to me, which also happened with Ashton. I forgot to mention that. They took them out, and they like cleaned them and was like doing all this stuff to them before they gave them to me. And I'm like, I want my baby immediately after you get my baby out. But with both instances, they did not do that. So after they finished doing whatever they were doing with her, which I should have spoke up and been like, give me my baby. I regret that, didn't do that. So after they finally give me my baby, I didn't feel the feeling. It just wasn't there. And I'm like looking at my little girl. I can't even explain how I felt. I was just I was upset, obviously, about the whole situation. And then I was expecting like this euphoria that didn't come. So then I was like disappointed. And yeah, like I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know what was wrong with me. So then I started feeling sorry for my daughter because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I suck. Like I'm not super happy right now. I'm not crying. I'm not like totally in love with her. Like what's wrong with me? So that was like really hard because like I didn't know why I felt that way, and it just made me feel like a bad person. Fast forward, obviously I had postpartum depression, and I had that for a while with her. I had it for about 5 months, and it happened literally immediately, like right after I gave birth to her. It was really hard for me to connect with her, and like for some reason I just felt very distant from her. And so something that I took out of this that is a big regret is I didn't even really know what postpartum depression was. And I don't know why I'm getting emotional. So I didn't know what postpartum depression was, so I just felt so bad about myself because I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I'm like, why don't I love her the way that I loved Ashton? It made me feel like I was just like this terrible person, and I was scared to tell anybody about it because I didn't want them to judge me and be like, what's wrong with you? Like, you don't feel like you love your own child? Like, what's your problem? But you know, those feelings are so real, and it's so important for you to tell people, because if you don't, it's just so much harder to overcome those feelings. And those feelings need to be talked about, and you have to talk to somebody. If you keep it inside, it's like you're rotting. Like, I don't know any other way to say it. It's like those thoughts completely take over your mind, and you just can't get out of your own head, and life just becomes a chore. So eventually I did seek help for that, and I was able to mentally and physically just make myself better without the need of medication. But I know that some people do need medication, and that's totally okay, obviously. Like, you do whatever you can to help yourself, but I was able to overcome it, and that's all that I care about. I'm so thankful for that. I was still in this same hospital with the nurses that I felt like didn't care, and that was totally validated. I mean, I would be like, the nurses would come in to, you know, they like come in and they press on your belly and they check all that. And I would just be bawling, like sitting in my hospital bed, just bawling. And I didn't even know why. Like, I didn't know what was wrong with me. And the nurses wouldn't even say anything. Like, they would come in and they would check me and then like ask, you know, the questions that they were going to ask me. And I would just kind of like, I was trying like not to cry as hard, like when they came in there, like, you know, like when they come in there, I would just try to be like, but it was like obvious that I was like crying and upset, and they didn't say anything. I wanted so badly to just feel like somebody cared. They didn't care. So that was hard. So yeah, my biggest regret with that situation is not knowing what postpartum depression is. And so if you are pregnant and you don't know what postpartum depression is, or even if you had a baby like me and still don't know what postpartum depression is, definitely do your research, know exactly what it is, know what to expect. And yeah, because I didn't, and that was hard. Okay, and better news. Hi. Do you want to get out? Okay, so fast forwarding to happier times. Obviously at this point, like, I was even more wanting, like, at this point, like, I needed this birth to be different. I was so scared of postpartum depression, and I was relating all of that with the hospital that I was giving birth at. So that was my number one thing. I was not going to give birth at that hospital. So this time around, me and my husband toured a bunch of different hospitals, and we went down to 2 different hospitals. We broke it down. We didn't like actually a lot of the hospitals, but we broke it down to 2. And the one that I ultimately chose, I chose because of, it was closer than the other one, but it was still a great hospital. I loved it so much. The problem that I had this time around was I went to a different office this time and chose an even different gynecologist than the one that I loved, because the one that I loved only delivered at the hospital that I didn't want to deliver at. So anyways, I chose a different gyno, but with the whole time that I was pregnant, I saw her one time because the doctors were on rotation. But this time I decided to not let it bother me if the person that I thought would deliver my baby was going to deliver my baby, and instead get to know all of the doctors at the office. I met with all of the different doctors that were there, and I, talked with them. I felt comfortable with them, and I felt good about, them delivering my baby. I was like, okay, if they deliver my baby, like, it's fine, and I know who this is. And so I just made sure that I was really familiar with all of them, and and so it was good. I was totally fine, even down to the last couple of days when I went to get checked. Like, I was totally fine with any of them delivering my baby. So when I was 37 weeks pregnant, there was one doctor that I didn't have a chance to meet yet, and I met him obviously at that appointment, and I loved him. He was so fun. He was so awesome. And he told me, he's like, if you give birth this weekend, which I think that you might, because your cervix is so soft, you're almost 100% effaced, you're 2 centimeters dilated, like, it looks like your body is like about to do this. And he's like, and if you deliver this weekend, I'm going to be delivering your baby. And so I was like, oh, okay. Like, I was happy about it because he was so great, and like, he made me feel so comfortable. He was just awesome, and like, his energy was just amazing. Like, he knew what he was doing, but he wasn't like not open to my ideas and the way that I wanted to do things. So I did end up going into labor 2 days later that weekend, and he delivered my baby, and it was just an amazing experience. Like, I finally got that experience that I wanted so bad. First of all, they let so many of my family members in the room, which was awesome. With the other doctors and the hospital, I was only allowed to have 3, and like, that was fine. Like, I had my mom, my sister, and my husband, but this time I was able to have my mom, my 2 sisters, my cousin, and my husband, and like, it was just awesome. I was like, yay, I get to be like surrounded by all these people that I love and like give birth. And another thing that I did differently this time is I did not find out the gender of the baby. So I didn't know that Auden was a boy. And that in itself was like the best surprise ever, like ever. I had that feeling of euphoria again. I don't know if it's just because, I just felt like I just met my baby for the first time. With like Ashton and Eve, I already had them named, I already knew who they were, I already had this image in my head of who they were gonna be. With Auden, that wasn't there, so it was just amazing. It was like a perfect experience. It was easy, like pushing him out was easy. The nurses were so kind. My doctor, like I said, was amazing, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. I did get an epidural as well this time too, and the anesthesiologist was awesome. He was so fun. Like, he was like trying to like make me and my husband laugh, and he was just good energy. Like, there was just so many like good vibes in the room that it just made me happy. Like, I was just happy the whole time. Even like before I got my epidural, I think I was almost 8 centimeters before I got my epidural. But this time I told myself that I would not freak out like I was with Eve. With Eve, I was literally telling myself, don't freak out. I was like on the verge of a panic attack. But this time I told myself, this is fine. I am delivering my baby. This is beautiful. This is perfect. I was trying to like go with the motions of my body. This time when I had Auden, I did a lot of research. I read a lot of books. A lot of books that I read, it was saying like to just like close your eyes and to just like imagine what's going on with your body and just like normalize it. Don't fear it. And so I was really trying to do that, and I felt like it really did help. Like, and I was on the birthing ball. I was like making like really low sounds, which I feel like helped as well, and it really helped me, and I didn't freak out at all. It was fine, like waiting for my epidural, like I was okay. It was just a great experience. I was smiling up until like my epidural, like even though, I mean, of course I wasn't smiling like during the contractions, but I was okay. Like I felt like I was there and I was experiencing it. And then of course I felt even better after my epidural, but I was really proud of myself for the way that I handled it. My baby is almost 8 months old and I haven't gone through any postpartum. I've been super, super in touch with my feelings and my emotions. I talk to my husband, to my mom, to my sisters about the way that I'm feeling. I put everything out there. I don't keep anything a secret. Everything's on the table and everything is normal, and I feel good about myself. I hope that my stories will help you guys if you're in the same kind of situation where you are uncomfortable or you don't want to stand up for yourself, or you feel like you can't take charge of like your birth and your labor and like all that experience. Like, I had 2 really bad experiences and I was so scared for my 3rd experience, but it happened. Like I got finally the birth that I wanted. Like I finally was able to get there. And yeah, like none of my births were perfect, but all of them were beautiful in their own way. And I love to hear birth stories. So if you want to share your birth story with me, I love to hear those. Like literally almost any time that anybody gives birth that I know, I'm like, tell me your birth story. I just think birth stories are awesome and amazing, and I just love it. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. If you got all the way to the end, I'm proud of you. I know that this was like really long, the longest video I've ever made, and the most like boring in a way because I'm just sitting in front of the camera. But I felt like it was important. I felt like I needed to share it, and I hope that you guys benefited from it. But yeah, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and that's it.